and we have a clinic that helps people with addiction. We prescribe a certain type of medications called medication-assisted, it's medication-assisted treatment, which is a certain kinds of medications in combination with behavioral therapies to help promote recovery. And this is especially important for opiate addiction and alcohol addiction because those ones have very good medical treatments available for them. So even without, and the name of my clinic is called My MAT Clinic, and we have a website. So it's all one word, My MAT Clinic. So even prior to COVID, the United States is becoming people in the United States are becoming increasingly depressed, anxious, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And one of the things that, really shows how bad it is we consume more of the world's anti-anxiety medicines and antidepressants in the terms of like SSRI medications like Prozac and Paxil and benzodiazepines like Xanax and Ativan and Valium than any other country in the world. And we also consume more opiates by far than any other country in the world. And what I mean by that is the prescribed opiates that are prescribed from a doctor's office. The United States consumes something like 99% of the world's Vicodin supply. So, and why is this? This is all has a lot to do with, trying to feel better. And there are short-term ways to feel better, but they lead to problems. And the big problem at the end of that is potentially becoming addicted or dependent on those drugs to feel a certain way. But what underpins all of that is basically problems with mental health. And what underpins mental health are problems with your physiology, both with your body, but also on a molecular level in your brain. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do is some of the strategies and things I'm talking about are nothing new. You're going to laugh at exercise and sleep and things like that. But my hope is to describe, what's happening on a molecular level in your brain when you don't do these things, and how much better your life can become by making these things part of your regular behavioral patterns. So understanding is key, right? Part of our treatment with our patients is to educate them on how they became addicted to drugs and alcohol, and what types of things promote recovery, and what types of things are likely to lead to relapse. So we're constantly working to address this. And with regular people, I tell Mike this, is that there's a continuum between being fully addicted to something and being, healthy. And along that continuum comes sort of bad habits, and then self-medicating, and then actually abuse. Alcohol abuse pre-exists addiction. And so anybody can move along this continuum based upon what's going on in their lives and what types of things they're doing. So that's sort of an overview of what we're talking about. And Mike, do you want to ask any questions about that so far?
Yeah, I wanted to, that's the basic backdrop. And that's in general without a pandemic. Okay. So before we get into the steps, Dave, can you talk about how that it's almost exacerbated because of words you and I talk about when we do prep, like isolation? Talk about how the lifestyle that we're living right now, and here it is, June 2020, basically impacts that, what you already said is going to happen anyway, right? In the brain, the body, and that scale you're talking about. So what happens now when you put pandemic on there, you put financial stress on that? Yeah. Talk about that, because you see people coming into your office every day. I mean, this is a real struggle.
It's the perfect storm. I mean, you had all this baseline anxiety, stress, and problems in society for a lot of folks that are suffering. And then you add on top of it fear and isolation. You're being told to stay at home. You're watching people die on TV, 24-hour news. You're being just basically blasted with information, and it's all bad. Like, they don't have a good news station that I've found. It's all about the amount of death, the death toll, and that just promotes tremendous anxiety. And then after that, there's, well, how am I gonna keep my job? Am I gonna remain employed? How am I gonna pay the bills? What about my kids? And it's just layer upon layer upon layer of stress And the way that manifests in people is anxiety, fear, depression. And then what happens then are behavior patterns to try to make yourself feel better right now. And one of those, for example, alcohol sales were up 55% in the United States. Like they exploded. And why? Because people have more time on their hands and they want to feel better right now. And so drinking is a quick way to get a lot of people there. Isolation is absolutely the worst thing somebody in recovery or somebody with a mental health disorder can do. Addiction is often referred to as a disease of isolation. And one of the first characteristics we see in people that are falling off of recovery or falling off of their treatment plan is they go missing. They stop checking in, they stop going to group, they don't go to their therapist. Their friends and social things that sort of like support and buttress their recovery start to become, they start to go missing. And then you end up in what's a downward spiral, basically. You become embarrassed. You feel less sense of worth because you've slipped, or maybe now you're fully relapsing. And then you're off to the races. You're like, well, this makes me feel better right now. That stuff, I can't even engage in those activities that I'm used to support my recovery. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
You know, and that's how relapses happen.
Yeah. Well, you know, I teach this in coaching is that you have your human needs, right? One of the human needs obviously is love and connection. One of them is growth. One of them is certainty, variety. I mean, these are some of the few. So what happens is when you don't get your needs met in a certain way, like for example, going to work, physically going into an office, guess what? You feel connection to people, you have socialization, you feel like you're growing, right? So now you take that away from somebody who was thriving on March 1st, and now you put them in a position that their home is not even prepared to be working. I mean, I happen to work from an office, so I'm lucky in that regard. But you know, my wife, you know, she shares my office a little bit, but she's working from home. That wasn't the thing she signed up for when the kids are, you know, pushed back at home, you know, on March 15th. So now you have somebody that's put in a situation environmentally, and now those needs aren't getting met. So what happens is we'll use what are called vehicles. Vehicles are things that transport you to your human needs, to your point. So you're talking about it from a medical perspective. I think about it from a behavioral perspective. So I know if you're not getting 3 out of 6 of your needs met, that's a problem, because you will get those needs met somehow, some way. One of them could be drugs, could be alcohol, it could be pornography, it could be relationship problems. You know, if you're not getting your needs met in your marriage, guess what? You'll find it somewhere else. So this is the same thing when we talk about behavior, but I love the way you talk about it from a medical perspective. So Dave, real quick, before we jump into the 7 steps, I think it's important. You and I talk a lot about neurotransmitters in the brain. I want people to understand there's a strong mind, body, and connection with every single thing we're going to talk about today. So this is not Pollyanna techniques. Everything that we're going to give you today is backed by science. It's backed by what happens between up here and what happens in the body. So give us a little bit on, you know, how, when we're going to talk about neurotransmitters throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about dopamine. We're going to talk about cortisol. So explain some of these things medically, like definitionally, before we get into the steps.
Okay.
Yep.
So, what underpins, human function basically are especially in your brain, are neurons, which are the nerves in your brain, connecting and talking to each other. They're constantly wiring and rewiring, and the chemical signals that they use to talk to each other are known as neurotransmitters, sometimes neurohormones. And your body has a whole bunch of different types of these. And when these become out of balance, what happens is the nerves try to compensate by changing their physical characteristics. And one of the things they do is they'll upregulate and downregulate receptors at the part of the nerve where one nerve releases chemicals to talk to the other nerve. It's called upregulation or downregulation. And what this means is it basically means that higher levels of a certain substance, that these neurotransmitters are required to get the same amount of connectivity. And again, this is part of the basis of addiction, is that dopamine, for example, is the probably single most important neurotransmitter we're talking about. It's the one responsible for motivation, reward, and emotional regulation. And there's normal levels in people's brains, and certain types of behaviors and functions make more dopamine. So if, for example, eating good food, pleasure, right? Dopamine. Having sex, pleasure, dopamine. Exercise, pleasure, dopamine. Social interaction that you like a party, friends, people that you have a very strong connection to, dopamine, 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 right? And normal levels of dopamine are very, very important. But what happens when you get too much dopamine, right? You get dysfunction. And so what drugs, like if you take, for example, methamphetamine, the first time somebody uses methamphetamine, they have 1,000 times more dopamine than is like normal.
Yeah.
And the brain cannot handle that. It was not designed for that level of dopamine. It produces insane amounts of euphoria. And so what the brain will try to do rather rapidly is get rid of all that extra dopamine. So it'll either metabolize it faster, reuptake it faster, or create enzymes that break it down faster, or it'll downregulate or get rid of receptors on the other end that are responsible. So what happens then is that the person said, that's a rewarding behavior. I want more of that rewarding behavior. So I'm going to use this drug or this alcohol again. But the second time they use it, slightly less rewarding. Third time they use it, less rewarding. And after a while, they're using drugs and alcohol just to get the baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where addiction is actually a medical disease, a chronic relapsing disease of the brain, because it's all about not having enough of the proper neurotransmitters and neuron dysfunction that results as a result. So drug use then becomes all about survival, all about just getting back to baseline. And what being below baseline looks like is severe depression, severe anxiety, zero motivation. I cannot get out of bed, and so on and so forth. But this is also common in people that have regular mental health issues like depression. They have less than normal amounts of these neurotransmitters, and they don't function. They don't have the same amount of pleasure as some of us, right? And that's where medications to treat that come in.
Yeah.
So there are good neurotransmitters that promote behaviors and survival that are very, very important for humans, right? And dopamine is one of them, serotonin, endorphins, you heard that. And then there are stress-related hormones, which are like cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. These are the fight or flight types of things that are required for you to be at peak performance. When you need to run away from a tiger, you need those neurotransmitters to survive, right? Or if you've been severely injured and you getting out of there is going to be the only thing that separates you surviving or not, you don't feel the pain, right? It's blocked. That's those natural endorphins kicking in along with epinephrine. However, when you are under the stress that we're under as a society, and you layer on COVID, like we talked about, guess what happens? The balance becomes shifted very, very much out of favor, and you have way too much cortisol, way too much epinephrine. You're watching the news, boom, you're producing these stress hormones. And we start giving up the behaviors that promote the Prosurvival balance. And that's why we have an epidemic of anxiety, depression, hopelessness, fear, and it manifests in a lot of human behaviors that are really sad. Yeah. So that was a lot. Yeah. Sorry, but
you know what? That's important. If people, as they're going through this, I want you to think about that. You know, when you think about the events that we're talking about today, you know, here is producing things that are positive, right? Cortisol, obviously not positive. Dopamine, positive. So the first thing, let's jump into it, Dave. So the first thing, number one, and this may come as a surprise to some. Dave and I were joking before the beginning here. He obviously a med student. I actually read this book when I was getting out of law school by a sports agent named Drew Rosenhaus. He wrote a book called A Shark Never Sleeps. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I look on my old life plans that I wrote, my goal plans, and I literally wrote down when I was 27, 28, 29 every year that a shark never sleeps. I thought sleep was bullshit, which I now know is not true. That was a very strong, bad limiting belief when I was a young man. So let's put the record straight, Dave. Sleep is important. So talk to us about some of the the medical part of sleep and what you recommend. Sleep.
So I'm equally embarrassed. I'm huge into exercise and diet and a bunch of health promoting activities. I'm like almost evangelistic about it in some respects, but I too basically had this idea in my head that, you know, less sleep is better because then I'm more productive. And then you go to medical school and it's like almost like this sort of like who can get the least amount of sleep and be the most badass tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you're way less badass than you think you are. And you're often pissed off and angry and irritated. It all comes from less sleep, but you're also not making great decisions.
Right.
And I'll go into that. So this year, 2020, my big kind of thing has been like sleep. And I listened to a lot of podcasts and, Joe Rogan and Dr. Peter Attia and Tim Ferriss. And they started having the same guy on over and over, Dr. Matthew Walker, who is a world-renowned sleep expert, because he just came out with a new book, Why We Sleep. And I listened to these podcasts, and my primary emotion was, oh crap, because the evidence, the scientific evidence, is so irrefutable in terms of like how detrimental it is for us not to have a proper 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep.
Wow.
And so I just hit you with a few bullet points. Like almost every higher species, including some insects, sleep. It's evolutionarily programmed in for a reason, right? And when you're sleeping, you're not doing other things that promote survival, right? You're giving up, gathering food, hunting, defending yourself against predation, defending your family. All these things evolution has decided that sleep is so important that you're going to trade off all these things that might actually end up in your death because you need to sleep. And for humans, 3.6 million years, we've been sleeping because it gets dark, we have no light, right? And we just go to sleep until about 100 years ago, when all of a sudden we had light anytime we wanted. And, post-industrial civilization is all about productivity, especially in first world countries. So you are becoming more productive, or you think you are anyway. And the trade-off is sleep. And I think it's gotten to an epidemic level. And if you watch this guy's videos and podcasts on YouTube, it will absolutely change like your understanding. But mental health and physical health, there's not a single organ system in the body that isn't negatively impacted by sleep. Wow. And negative emotional functioning and emotional regulation, highly, highly impacted by sleep. And what's even worse is cognitive decline, and Alzheimer's disease is directly correlated with poor sleep. If you want to do the one thing for yourself that's cheap and free and is a huge prevention mechanism against Alzheimer's, get good sleep right now. I mean, it's irrefutable. But let's talk about cancer, right? You're like, well, how does sleep affect cancer? Well, your immune system is highly, highly impacted by the quality of sleep, specifically deep wave sleep and REM sleep. So slow wave sleep is otherwise known as deep wave. These are where your brain basically flushes toxins, resets its neural connections, produces important neurotransmitters like dopamine, and that's what happens during the night. Growth hormone, serotonin. But what it also does is downregulates cortisol and downregulates adrenaline and norepinephrine. It's incredibly important for memory formation and memory storage. Basically, one night of bad sleep, your hippocampus can no longer acquire new memories. And they study this on college students all the time. But what about cancer? Well, there are these cells in your body called natural killer cells. And one of their jobs is to cruise around your body looking for foreign invaders. And your body's constantly is making cancer. Basically, there are cells that become precancerous that then turn into cancer. And one of the things that prevents everybody from having cancer are these cells going around killing the cancer. And this is what AIDS is. AIDS, kills T cells and natural killer cells or prevents them. So it's similar. Anyway, one night of sleep deprivation will decrease natural killer cell function by up to 70%. And here we are doing this to ourselves all the time. Once a week, I go to the hospital, I do a 24-hour call where even if I'm not being bothered during the night, I am not sleeping well. And the World Health Organization considers this to be such a big problem that they consider night shift work carcinogenic.
Wow.
So
wow.
I didn't know that. I mean, it's just like, wait, you work at night and that's you have a higher chance of getting cancer? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And breast cancer, definitely correlated. Bowel cancer and prostate cancer, all directly correlated to poor sleep over time. And it's the one thing that we give up so readily is have good sleep. Anyway, so we can talk about
no,
some
I
of
think
the
it's important. I think it's important though. The thing you hit. We're talking about anxiety and depression today. Dave hit this really in the middle there. You know, when you get good REM sleep, right? You're talking about restoring the positive, like dopamine, the things. Remember, cortisol bad, dopamine good, right? So just
up to a point.
yeah, exactly. Right. True. So, but think about that, and I think I want to challenge people out there that get away from that belief that, you know, because you can, you know, do all this stuff in a 20-hour period and you can survive off 4 hours sleep. You know, I read a book years ago. It was the sleep patterns of United States presidents. It was interesting. And they talked about how Abe Lincoln would just nod off in the White House in the middle of the day. You know, he'd just take naps. He was a nap guy. So, but the one thing that you would think, you know, the president of the United States has always got to be game on. But guess what? You got to be getting your sleep. So that's number one. I want to make sure we hit that. We got some questions that are coming in. We're going to hit the questions at the end. So let's jump to number two. Hydration. Oh, by the way, here's another book too. This is another book my mom gave this to me years ago, literally years ago. I didn't read it because I laughed at it, but now I'm reading it. Mom, you'd be proud of me. I pulled this out a couple of years ago and I'm rereading it now. And there's a lot of similar facts and data points in there. So again, anything that Dave and I've talked about, you can feel free to message us. We got studies and books on that. So the second thing, another simple one, before we start going into behavior and mindset stuff, we're still going to stick to biochemistry here. Hydration. Okay. I was reading just the other day in preparation that the majority of people are technically medically dehydrated. Now, what I read is that you take your body weight, basically divide it by 2, and that's how many ounces of water that you should have in a given day on average. Now, you live in a hot environment like me, it's going to be 111 degrees. In Phoenix today, it's going to be a little bit higher. You live in Florida where it's going to be humid. But talk to us a little bit about hydration and how that affects mindset and, you know, combating some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, with all of these things, there's this physical mental connection, and they are inextricably connected. You cannot abuse your body and not have a mental, decreased productivity mentally or a mental consequence is what I'm trying to say. So hydration, I mean, it's like sleep. It's something that everybody blows off. And when when I say hydration, I'm talking water. The body is mostly water. Cells are filled with water. And yeah, I know I got my water right here too.
Got to do it every day, right by your office.
I mean, the long and the short of it is hydration vastly improves physical function and vastly improves mental function. Not only does it flush toxins and result in better cellular function and recovery and decreased fatigue, so you get more done during the day and feel better about it, but it has profound effects on your immune system. There's studies that even show that your cardiovascular system, people that are chronically dehydrated are at higher risk for hypertension, heart attacks, things like that. So the list of things that hydration important for can't be understated. And again, because I'm the addiction doctor, I have to say I'll just talk about alcohol. Alcohol totally screws up your sleep. Just one drink within a few hours of going to sleep results in fragmented sleep, less REM sleep, less shortwave sleep. Just one drink. The whole nightcap thing, that's horrible. It decreases your cortical function, so you think you're sleepier, but you don't get, what you end up with is not having quality sleep, right? So what is alcohol? Alcohol is not a form of hydration. Alcohol blocks what's called antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin, which is the signaling hormone or molecule that goes to your kidneys. And as a result, when it goes to your kidneys, it tells them to save water. It's like your kidneys are very sensitive to salt and dehydration. And so this molecule, antidiuretic hormone, tells the kidneys, oh my gosh, you need to start saving water. And it is also responsible for thirst, right? Alcohol blocks that, makes you pee. It's a diuretic.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's, and real quick, I got some friends, I know who's on here. I got some friends on here, Dave, from Chicago, who happen to be from Chicago. They have this term called final. Like when you're going out one night, you're like, final. That means we're going to go out till like 1 o'clock in the morning and have one more drink. Let me tell you guys, final may work when you're 20s, but not in your 30s and 40s, and definitely not in your 50s. So hear what Dave said. One thing that I want to point out. So Dave talked about the obvious things of hydration, flushing toxins, promoting weight loss, skin complexion. That's another big one. But let me talk about the anxiety and depression.
Improves mood.
The boosting of cognitive functioning. I mean, the biggest part about this is not just the physiological aspect, but the improving of your mood. Just to be able to improve your mood. I mean, you guys know this, when you wake up every day and you're tired, not sleeping, right? There's number one, and you're not hydrated, right? Now you're behind the 8 ball, and you haven't even rolled out of bed yet, right? So how are you going to go have this kick-ass presentation? How are you going to be the best version of yourself, that day as a parent, and whatever you do? I would just say, our goal every day is to be the best version of ourselves. Well, you got to get yourself at least started, and sleep is number one. Hydrating number two. It's one of the first things I do first thing in the morning. Literally, I just pound about 12 ounces of water.
What does everybody else do?
Watch the news.
No, I drink coffee.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because you haven't got enough night's sleep, and first thing you need to do is have increased stimulation and wakefulness, and coffee does that. It blocks adenosine, which promotes sleep, right? And so it tells your brain be more wakeful. And
so they're watching the news and drinking their coffee. That's a double whammy.
No, and then what's the third thing?
What?
Social media. You pick up your phone and you
scrolling through your Facebook feed to see how many likes you got yesterday. Yeah. Guys,
Instagram account.
When we wrap this up, we're going to talk about that. That's an important thing we're going to talk about. So the third step we're going to talk about is engaging activity that stimulates the brain. Dave, I know this is a big one for you. When you and I were doing homework, you said that, outside of the sleep and taking care of the body, which is obviously hydration and sleep, the big one that you're big on is, because we're in this time where we're isolated and we physically can't be around people, this is a big thing. Now, we have to be mindful that there's people all over the country here on this webinar, people maybe in parts where they can't physically be, but there are ways to still engage people, right? So talk a little bit about this and combating anxiety and depression.
So look at what's happening, right? I mean, people are just chomping at the bit to go and be with other people. There's all this restaurant controversy. Should we allow seating? Should you wear masks? It's open, not open. I mean, people are going nuts over, it's only been the quarantines. I mean, we're talking like not that long, but people cannot handle isolation. We're humans. And by definition, we need social contact to have pleasure. I mean, what do they do to people in prisons that are, the worst thing you can do to somebody?
Confinement.
Solitary confinement, right? There's nothing worse than that for a human. And what happens is it creates massive amounts of anxiety and depression. And so, again, back to this whole what causes relapse? Isolation. What makes mental health problems, whether it's depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, bipolar, you name it, across the board, lack of connectivity. And the kind of connectivity that we crave is human connectivity above all. We're pack animals. We've been this way for millions and millions of years. We support each other's survival. And again, what does it come down to in the brain? Things like dopamine and serotonin and various hormones that get released when you have meaningful social interactions or doing something meaningful in general. And as Mike and I, one of the primary ways to feel better almost immediately isn't just to socially engage, but it's to set about helping other people. If there's something that you can do that is going to be meaningful to another person and help them, that is an incredibly rewarding, dopamine-producing, depression-defeating kind of activity that you can engage in.
Yeah. One thing I want to throw on there is picking up the phone. I mean, that's the one thing about, the lack of distance of being able to not see people. I would say the second week, probably the third week of March, I was in that same situation in Arizona. And I have as my friends know me, I'm a journal guy. I keep my journals everywhere I go. So actually what I did in my weekly planning is I wrote down on my weekly plan a list of people in my life, my friends, my family, that I want to just pick up the phone and call and just connect with them. Literally, hey, how you doing? Are you struggling with things? How the kiddos? And I to your point, Dave, I tell you that first day I did it, I had a busy day. I had 8 hours of Zooms and meetings and stuff like that, but I still fit in about a handful of just personal touches. I felt so good when I came home because I'd connected with people I hadn't talked to in months, just to hear their voice. And you're right. That was what was going on in my mind. I guess it was the dopamine that kicked in and said, hey, you need to do that more often, Mike. It's a simple thing. It doesn't cost you any money. Write a list down every week of people in your life that you just want to connect with and I always say for no good reason. You know, that people at the beginning were like, why are you calling me, man? Do you have the COVID? Did something happen? What's wrong? I haven't heard from you in months.
Yeah.
Which is sad, right? Because it's an admission to me that, man, I suck at staying in communication with certain people. So I'll tell you what, the journal and writing a list every week is a great way to connect if you can't physically connect with other people, right?
Yeah, when you're overwhelmed and you're busy and you can barely get this, the things on your list done, the last thing you want to do is you just don't think that there's time to reach out and talk to somebody you haven't connected with for a while. And it's interesting because one of the assignments that we were giving patients and talking to patients about was like, you have to have a plan for success, right? And we're going to talk exercise, sleep, but staying connected is one of these things. And one of the ways you do that is every single day you reach out to these people you haven't talked to in a while, old friends, and you rekindle those relationships. And we were even having some of them reach out to relationships that have been broken or hurt through their, addiction-related behaviors and begin mending those. Yeah. And that's actually in the 7 step or the 12 steps rather.
12 steps, yeah.
So again, it's the same thing. It's the connection, and people have a lot of time on their hands. So, why not? Like, that was actually an upside of COVID for a lot of people, is that they got to be more connected to their families than normal and reach out to people they haven't talked to for a long time.
Yeah, that's the one thing I started asking people, what's the biggest thing that's come out in a positive way from COVID? And that's the number one answer I was getting, was connecting with people and family. Yeah. All right, so let's go to number 4. Step number 4, practicing gratitude.
What happened to exercise, man?
Huh?
What happened to exercise?
I know. Well, we're going to get to exercise. Exercise is
not skip.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he mentioned at the very beginning, right? You talk about things that are high spikes of dopamine, right? He said sex. He said work it out, right? It's 45 minutes at a time. Those are high spikes. We're good at that. But practicing gratitude. Practicing gratitude. I'm a big fan of this. There's lots of studies on this. We don't have time today to talk about it. But if you don't believe us, go on Google, literally just put in gratitude effect on brain or gratitude mindset. There's study after study after study. The biggest thing that I've read that's continuous, that Dave and I were talking about in prep, is not just having gratitude in the mind. Okay, it's got to be something overt. So that's, again, going back to the journal. I'm a big fan of just writing things down, right? We'll get to writing stuff down at the end here. But writing down every morning, what are you grateful for? I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to have a family. I mean, you don't just write the same things every day. That's an overt act of writing it down. But here's another overt act to the other point of Dave, making a connection with another person, picking up the phone, is do something to reach out to somebody, write somebody a thank you card, maybe you write down a handful of people that you want to reach out to this week and you express your gratitude. So gratitude, what's this doing exactly with the mind? You're talking about mind-body connection, Dave. So you're saying there's something.
What you're describing is purposeful behavior, right? And so having purposeful behavior and engaging in purposeful, meaningful behavior is one of these reinforcing things that we're talking about. And gratitude, practicing gratitude and having an actual plan for how you're going to do it, like as if it were meditation, is a purposeful behavior that is rewarding. And this is what you do professionally, is you get us to make lists and then set about making those things into realities by having a plan. And in order to execute that plan, you have to break it down into pieces. And you have to do purposeful things on a daily basis to advance yourself towards those goals. You don't get change any other way, right? Change doesn't magically just appear. You don't just wake up one day and say, wow, half the stress I had for the last 42 years is gone. Yeah. So I think I'll just do all these things now that I've always wanted to do but never could.
Right.
So,
yeah. And what Dave said, it's one of my biggest adages, what's written is real. What's planned is possible. What's written is real. When you write something down, and I'm going to get to this in a minute when we hit goals and writing stuff down and goals, but that's a big important thing. So just the fact of writing a letter, showing gratitude, paying something forward. There's a cool study. When you do your Google searches, I think in the top 5 studies, the most recent, if you do like in the last year or two, where they made 3 different groups do something, like one group had to write a letter of gratitude and not send it. Then the other group wrote a letter of gratitude and sent it. And then the other group just thought about gratitude. And they're literally measuring what's going on inside the brain. They give these people a survey, and it's a tiered system. The people who actually did the gratitude and did the overt act had the highest level, but right behind it was people who didn't even send the letter. The fact that they just wrote it down was pretty damn close to the people who actually sent the letter. So it's interesting how it's just get it out of your head, right? Get out of your head, get it onto paper. What's written is real. You start putting it into play. So gratitude, very easy thing. Again, costs you absolutely nothing. All right, so let's get to the next one. I call this the true up with yourself. Dave hit this just now, purposeful. Now, and by the way, I know I got friends out there that, maybe you're an Oprah fan or Dr. Phil fan or a Tony Robbins fan. We got, different fandoms out there. The true up is a term I came up with a long time ago. True up is my word. It's be honest with yourself. It's the step on the scale. It's the look in the mirror. So here's what I want to recommend you do. And Dave and I are doing this as we speak in our coaching because it's the middle of the year. June 30th marks the halfway point. So this is your chance to kind of go in the locker room, look back on the first half of the year, first 6 months, and say, what was great? And again, write it down, write journal. And then you say, secondly, what wasn't great? What were some of my setbacks? What were some of my challenges? And the third part is what has to change? So when I was looking at this, one of the famous, actually I think it was Oprah actually had a show on this. That was one of her most popular shows. She called it Taking Stock in Where You Are in Their Life. And she had all these guests come on. It was really high rated. And they were talking, these are famous people talking about when they did their step on the scale and they trued up with themselves. And that doesn't cost us anything, guys. We got another week in that week before July 1 hits. If you're not a fan of journaling, I'm not saying diary. I didn't say diary. A journal is a thing. It's a noun, right? It's having this close to you at all times. So when you do get thoughts, you jot them down. You get it out of your head. That's an overt act. Watch what it does to your brain. Dave will tell you, dopamine, right? That's not a cortisol event. That's a dopamine event. So again, I know there's people out there that say, oh my gosh, here goes Lindstrom on his diary thing. No, I'd say diary. Journal. What's written is real. So Dave, I would be remiss before we get to our last 2 points, which is goal setting and getting rid of small stuff. Let's talk about exercise. I think that's an important thing. You hit it right on the head at the beginning. You said there's a few things that have to happen: exercise, sleep, and meaningful social engagement. So talk a little bit about the obvious, but explain us what's going on here and here.
Yeah. So exercise, sleep, meaningful engagement, and hydration. These are all really, really low hanging fruit. And they're not things that people don't already know, but right. Why is exercise so critical to happiness and function? Well, again, just like sleep, for millions and millions of years, we were not sedentary, right? We weren't designed to be sedentary. We weren't designed to pull up to a window of a Burger King and get 5,000 calories. We were constantly moving. And, the way we're biologically designed, both mentally and physically, again, that connection between the two is so important, is based upon millions of years of evolution. And only recently have we become increasingly sedentary and had abundant food supplies and 24-hour-a-day light and things like that. So again, it's the hormone balance. So exercise produces dopamine, endorphin, right? Runner's high. These are natural molecules that bind the opioid receptor in your brain, the one that's hijacked by heroin, right? It's there for a reason. It's to produce euphoria and pleasure and to tell your brain and body, hey, repeat this activity, do this again and again. So what does the science say in terms of exercise? It's irrefutable. There's studies done out, many studies done in the United States, United Kingdom, and they all kind of come up with the same conclusion that moderate exercise 3 to 4 times a week not only produces mental health, decreases depression, decreases stress, but also has profound physical benefits as well, right? And so one of them out of Duke University, for example, is called the SMILE study, compared groups. Sorry?
This is good. Hit this.
You read that one?
Yeah, this is good. I want you to hit it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just easy. It's just, you have a cohort of clinically depressed people, and you randomize them to an exercise group, SSRI, which is Prozac or Zoloft group, and a combination group and a placebo group with none of the above. And amongst the groups where there's exercise and or exercise with the drug, the outcomes were the same. In other words, exercise alone is as good as taking Zoloft, right? but both were profoundly better than the placebo group, much, much better than not doing anything, right? But what's even better is that the exercise group had a much more long-lasting or enduring effect. So after the trial, when they stopped the SSRI, 38% of the Zoloft group relapsed, whereas only 8% of the exercise group relapsed. And those that continued exercising even after had a 50% greater lasting non-depression than those that were stopping exercise or still taking Zoloft. So, I mean, and then, okay, so these medications all have bad side effects. I mean, they cannot be understated. One of the main things I talk to my patients about is the relative trade-off between, you know, helping you with your depression by using one of these meds and the side effects. And there are things like no libido, weight gain, insomnia. So we have to always talk about the pros and cons, but what I'm always telling people is we should always be working towards being on less drugs. You know, and for some people, it's not possible. If you're an insulin-dependent diabetic, you're going to be on insulin, right? But for a non-insulin dependent diabetic, you can make major lifestyle changes, lose weight, and sometimes you can become healthy enough not to be on meds anymore. The same thing is true with mental health for some people and addiction for some people. So exercise, again, when you're feeling depressed, it's the last thing you want to do. You want to lay on the couch, you want to eat, you want to maybe drink alcohol, you want to basically binge watch shows, you want to be on social media. You don't want to motivate and go outside and physically exert yourself.
Yeah.
But if you can do it within 1 month, there's already a measurable benefit. And within 4 months, the benefits are as good as an SSRI. And I'm not saying everybody, but most people, okay?
And I think and this ties right into our 6th point, which is writing small and attainable goals, right? That's our number 6. Number 6 is writing small and attainable goals. And I want to put the number 6 right on what Dave said. I've been in that position, Dave, where I've been on the road, I'm traveling, my energy's low, I haven't slept well, you're entertaining, whatever. And you know intuitively, like, man, if I got up tomorrow and just got to the gym and even walked the treadmill, I know I'm doing good things for myself. Yeah. I set the alarm. I don't get up. I slip through the alarm. I just get back into the hamster wheel, right? So we all know this. We're all smart people. We know what it's going to do to endorphins. We know what it does to the body. So what I wanted to say is write down small goals. What we're not saying, Dave's not saying is you got to go run 3 miles a day for a month. That's not what he said. It's do something. Go for a walk. If you have a dog, walk your dog, right? Do something. Slowly but surely, just set a goal between now and Friday. If it's Monday, between now and Friday, I want to get up. I want to, you got watches anymore that, track your steps. I've got my other watch that I usually wear that tracks. It's right there. You just, it costs you $50. You say, I'm going to get in 2,000 steps today, then 3,000 steps. By the end of the week, maybe you get up to 10,000 steps. But it's important when we talk about the second half of the year. That's why we're having this right now. Is this true up? Is write these goals down, make them small, make them attainable, and don't be thinking about between now and the end of the year, especially now. I know some of my friends out there that have been coaching for a long time, that may sound like it flies in the face of how I teach or coach, and it does a little bit, but I never factored in a pandemic, okay? I literally wake up, Dave, like a lot of us. I don't know what to expect today. My governor may come on tomorrow and say, you can't go outside. I may go to my gym today and they're like, sorry, buddy, the gym shut down. I don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow. So I'd love to set goals for now in December, but I don't. I just think about next week. Next week, even myself, who's been a long-term goal setter or midterm goal setter, I'm now short-term. I just think about what I got to get in between now and Sunday and Sunday. And I think that what you said is important. Factory in exercise. If you don't put it in the calendar, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's a date with yourself. It's 30 minutes. It's 20 minutes, whatever. Write those goals down and get that exercise in, no matter how little it is, right?
Right. So, I mean, I got several things to say. You're spot on, right? Why do diets fail? Because they're not sustainable, right? You go from overeating to like doing something extreme. It's very, very hard to make it stick, right? With our addiction population, they are so overwhelmed at baseline, and they're constantly what we call future tripping. They're worried about this. They have social problems, legal problems, relationship problems, we're like, look at, it's just like, it's 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time. And what our goal together is to slowly move you from active drug use patterns to less and less and less. I'm not asking you to basically be 100% abstinent or cured tomorrow. I want small incremental improvements over time. And so when they come back to the office and they say, oh, I relapsed. And I said, well, what happened? And it's like, well, this happened and this happened. And then I used a little, and I go, but look at, you're here. You're in my office. You did not relapse to the extent that the wheels were falling off and you're off on a tear, on another bender, right? You came here. So what? You relapsed. So what? Sometimes people fall off their diets, right? Let's reset right now. And you know what? Hey, look, your urine drug screen here says you relapsed on marijuana and alcohol, but you didn't relapse on your drug of choice. You didn't relapse on opiates. That is a victory, right? So making them small and attainable and then stacking them together is how you go from where you are now to over time making significant change. But you have to set yourself up for success. And in order to do that, you have to do exactly what you're talking about, is you have to define these things. Yep. And then you have to break them down into their elements. And then you have to basically measure a little bit at a time, right? Just so you keep yourself honest in the process.
Yep, that's good. So you heard it here, guys. For it's small, make it small. Don't think about between now and the end of the year. Think about 1 week at a time, guys. 1 week at a time. I've many friends and clients. Some people are on this webinar who've battled addiction and gone through treatment centers and have taught me through their challenge and victory that the simple phrase, and I know it's taught in the 12 steps in the programs, 1 day at a time. 1 day at a time. I know you know that, Dave. That's no different with us right now. During
1 hour. I mean,
with this pandemic,
a long time.
Yeah, with this pandemic, it's very similar. All right, so let's finish up with our last hit, and then we got some questions. We by the way, feel free to pump in your Q&A. Anything, could be questions, advice. I got some questions on the books. We do have a few already coming in. We'll get those in a minute. We're going to be done, guys, in a few minutes, so hang with us. So the last one, number 7, I have this acronym I created. GROSS stands gross. Gross stands get rid of small stuff, whatever you want to call it. Get rid of small things, whatever you want to call it. I call it gross. You know what I'm talking about. Read between the lines. So get rid of small things in your life or stuff. It's decision making. Decision. The word decision means cut. Just make a decision. In the second half of the year, that's it. No more. Like, that person is bad mojo for me, right? That person is no longer going to be a negative impact on my life. That thing that I continue to give energy to that I'm worried about, I'm not going to worry about it anymore. Just make some key decisions. How do you do it? You decide up here and then you write it down, right? It's what's written is real. And then you tell somebody. That's the overt act. Let your spouse know. Let your coach know. Let somebody around you, a peer. Hell, let Dave and I know. Send us an email and say, hey, by the way, you inspired me. By July 15th, this is a decision I will make. Hold me accountable. That's what we're here for. But this is not just mental decisions. This could be something as simple as decluttering your life, decluttering your home. I know my big metaphor and reality is literally when we moved into this new house a year ago, it has a shed in the back part of the property. It's locked, it's neat, it's nice, and it's messy. And it's such a metaphor because when we moved in, I just pushed everything in there and I lock it up and I don't have to see it. But in my mind, I know it's disorganized. So it was, during COVID, here it was. It was my advice to myself. I'm going to clean up the damn shed. So I spent a full day. It was 100 degrees out. I tell you what, man, the dopamine was running through my body. At the end of the day, I was tired. I was hot. But I looked at it and I thought, oh, that was the best 5 hours. I feel like I cleared my mind and I did something simple. Didn't cost me any money. It's something that didn't need to happen, but I wanted it to happen. So I guarantee there's somebody out there, you've got something. It could be your office. It could be something at your house. It could be a closet. It could be your database. I had a guy email me yesterday and said, Mike, I'm taking your advice. I'm finally going to clean up my database. I'm literally getting rid of getting rid of people I haven't talked to in years. And I'm cleaning up a new database and creating a whole new hit list because I'm in sales. I love it. Talking about clarity, right? Clarity is power. So get rid of stuff, GROSS, get rid of that in your life. Decluttering, very important. All right, so we got some questions coming in, Dave. Do you mind?
Nope.
All right.
Somebody wants to know the name of the book again and the doctor. And it's Dr. Matthew Walker. He's
Yeah.
a English-born neuroscientist whose sleep lab is at Berkeley, at UC Berkeley.
Okay.
And
Right.
you can just Google Dr. Matthew Walker, and he has a YouTube video and a YouTube page and tons of videos. I watched one last night with him at Google.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one I referenced too. This is the book I referenced called Power Sleep. It's Dr. James Moss. So Dave's got a book he recommends. I've not read that one. I've just heard some of his stuff on the internet. I've read this one. Either way, they're both great books. You get the idea. No longer is sleep something to be proud of when you have lack of it. Don't be prideful and bragging about how much you got done. So one of the questions here, Dave, can you talk about long-term, let's call it 15 years, usage of antidepressants on the brain and memory? Can you talk about long-term usage of antidepressants on the brain and memory?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that there's an easy way to talk about this, but it's very multifactorial. It really depends on what antidepressants and what quantities for how long. And it also, but see, you're not just taking antidepressants alone. There's a bunch of other things that we just talked about today that are also resulting in long-term memory and function. And so you want to get poor sleep for 10 years, you'll have decreased memory and function. So I am not a psychiatrist, and so I don't necessarily specialize or talk on like long-term consequences of certain psychotropic medications. But I will say this, there are necessary medication for many people to function and survive. But over time, I always feel that as a doctor, if you can be on less medications and smaller amounts of medications, it's better for you. And the way you get there is by changing behaviors and doing things that promote, better functioning, both cognitively, mentally, and physically. So I guess I'll leave it at that. It's kind of a very difficult question to answer quickly.
Yep. And by the way, we'll have all of our information. You can get us the Zoom should send you a confirmation or a thank you for registering. Question came through, would love to share this recording with my family. By all means, Dave and I are very abundant about our material. Give it away, share it, forward it. This is recorded. We'll have it as a file. We'll get it out. But if there's somebody who wants to email me directly, you have all my contact information because you got that. We'll get this out in the next couple of days.
Mike, I'll say this in the previous question too. Like if you're depressed and you're not sleeping well, you're not functioning well, you're not socially interacting, that's going to affect your brain and memory. So maybe you need to be on that medication. So it's a complicated answer.
Yeah, so I'll leave this one to the doc. I have my opinions on it. What are your thoughts about CBD oils? Obviously, the question would pertain to what's it being used for? But there are many studies. The only challenge, I think we all know this, that's why it's not federally regulated or approved. It's not FDA approved. However, the cannabis industry is not going anywhere anytime soon, as you can see with the ratification in the states and the usage. But Dave, you want to comment about that?
Yeah, so I mean, CBD is all the rage. And so THC has been shown to be bad for sleep in similar ways that alcohol is. I mean, temporarily it reduces anxiety and cortical function, but at the trade-off of REM sleep and shortwave sleep. So CBD is supposed to be it's a cannabinoid. It's not a psychoactive medication. It's a non-psychoactive medication. And the thing about it is this: right now, we do not have studies to show that CBD is sleep promoting or benefiting. But the placebo effect sure is. I'll tell you that, and placebo effect is real. If you think CBD helps you and gets you off to sleep and it's a relatively pure source of it, by all means, have a habit with CBD. But the problem is that because it's not regulated properly, what kind of CBD, what purity, what concentration? I mean, we're talking a lot of different molecules, not one molecule here. So until proper studies are done, we cannot comment, on its efficacy or non-efficacy. We just know that based on what we've seen so far, there's not a lot of evidence that we have to say that it has a improved sleep or function.
Yep. Good. All right. So we're at the top of the hour. We always promise to honor people's time. There's a quick request. I was going to do this anyway as a quick wrap up of the 7. Number 1 was sleep. and its impact. 2, hydration, drink your water. 3, engaging activities that stimulate the brain, socialization, anything. Practicing gratitude, true up with yourself, mid-year check, right? Look backwards on the first 6 months of the year, look at the next 6 months and figure out what has to change. Write it down, right? That's number 6, writing small and attainable goals. Look at it constantly. That's why you got to keep it out. Don't put it in your file cabinet. Don't put it in somewhere you can't see it. Put it on your dry erase board, put it up nice and big. Number 7 is get rid of small things in your life, right? It could be decluttering. It could be making small decisions. When you make decisions, it feels good. It could be a big one that you may have been struggling the last 90 days because COVID, I don't know. A lot of people are going through a lot of things, guys. And I want to leave you with this. People are struggling out there. And that's why I wanted to do this with Dave. Dave and I are very passionate about the subject. My own family, I've got people in my client group as we speak that are struggling with anxiety and depression. My views on anxiety and depression have massively changed in the last 10 years. I know there's old webinars or seminars on stages when I was in my early 30s. I'm 47 now, guys, where I used to have a different belief. I believed if you're strong-willed and strong-minded that you could overcome things. I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that. People have certain predispositions. I've listened to my doctor friends. I listen to people like Dr. Dave who've over time shown me that everybody's different. Everybody's biochemistry is different. So don't think you're Superman. Don't think you're Superwoman. Don't think you're Supermom or Superdad. If you're not feeling great, it's okay. It's okay to admit it. It's okay to call me. Call a doctor. Reach out to your friends.
Yeah.
What we don't want to have do is you go down the wrong path and you end up in Dr. Dave's office in 6 months or a year because you have not just these underlying issues that festered and you found a different avenue and you end up, having to be in Dr. Dave's office. So that's why we wanted to have this time with you. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. And Dave, you want to have any parting thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah. Well, you're talking about shame and stigma associated with depression and drug use and stuff. And we could do a whole podcast on that alone, but you're absolutely correct. There's no shame and stigma. You need to ask for help.
Yep.
And that's the most self-benefiting, promoting behavior, taking positive action. Thank you for having me on, Mike. I thought this was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody who's chimed in. Take a look for the recording. You'll get a confirmation. Feel free to email me directly. I'd love to connect with you guys, and stay safe out there, everybody. All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and sign off with the recording, Dave.
Okay, I'll talk to you in a bit.